No, but these reports from the Iranian news agency and Fars news agency, they've been reporting the fact that Iran is thinking of passing a legislation. Now, what happens if it formalizes a legislation? What I was also reading on Telegraph and other newspapers is that Iran has also contacted the United Nations Maritime Authority, so which means that they are actually thinking of formalizing this toll booth system on the Strait of Hormuz. So, do you think that Iran is going to face some kind of an opposition on this? Because ultimately, everything boils down to the maritime sovereignty as well.
I mean, of course, there are countries that will be going hammer and tongs about it. This is a route that takes care of at least 20% of the world's energy supplies. It connects that route, and even the alternate routes are very difficult. Even, for instance, tomorrow the war were to stop, you would still need all that Iranian help to demine this region that has led to this kind of a choke point.
But I was also reading, Smita, that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they're already in Islamabad. JD Vance, it was also planning to go to Islamabad and have some kind of a negotiation or talks. What is happening on that front? What are you hearing from your sources? Is this negotiation in Islamabad happening or not happening? That's not very clear. And Tehran is consistently denying that, no, we don't believe in any talks. What is actually happening behind the curtains?
I think it was either your show or somebody else's where this news had come in, and I had initially reacted saying that, look, please take it with a bucket load of salt.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of ifs and whys to this entire theory. First of all, Pakistan at best, even if it is serving any role, which publicly, remember, their own ministers are now saying that we are only a part of a regional diplomacy. There are no talks on. Yesterday, somebody said that there is no, I think the foreign ministry spokesperson was asked about it, and he said that at least we do not have any information of passing on any so-called 15-point peace plan, either physically or digitally.
Do you believe that there is a strong resentment within the Trump administration now, starting from Joe Kent to Tulsi Gabbard, and then we also had an ex-CIA chief, Leon Panetta, also speaking that this is Trump's fault. Do you feel that there is a great sense of resentment now within the Trump administration, though everybody is not saying it on record?
There is. I mean, he may try and dismiss off a voice like Joe Kent saying that, oh, I don't know much about him and all. But it's quite telling. And it's quite telling that even the neoconservatives in the MAGA wars, the ones who were solidly for the Iraq war as an external interference tool, not all of them are comfortable.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Donald Trump has pushed back a self-imposed deadline for attacks on Iran's power grid to April 6th, citing progress in negotiations to end the ongoing war in the country. Now, Thursday's announcement comes as the president continues to pressure Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which is a vital waterway for oil traffic. And if you look at his post, I'm just going to read out the post, which is a short one. He writes that as per Iranian government request, please let this statement serve to represent that I'm pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th, 2026 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Then he says talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by the fake news media and others, they are going very well. Now, the post marked the latest postponement Trump has announced since the first threatened Iran's energy system. But what is happening on the other side? Now, Iran is trying to tighten its grip on Hormuz Strait, and they have already built a de facto toll system where the countries, if they have to pass their ships, they have to pay a certain amount, and that is for a small stretch. What we are also hearing from the Iranian news agencies is that Iran is trying to pass a legislation so that they can convert the Strait of Hormuz into something like a Suez Canal or a Panama Canal. So where is this crisis headed to? And according to the latest inputs, are we really going to see any kind of ceasefire if it comes to the Iran and Israel war? Joining me this evening is international affairs expert, veteran journalist, and someone who's been a primetime anchor with the various news channels. Smita Sharma joins us this evening. Thank you so much, Smita, for joining. It's a real pleasure to have you on the
Thank you.
program. And I'd like to begin with the latest post which has been put out by Donald Trump. Now, what does this mean if he's postponing the deadline to April 6th? Is he buying time? Is he trying to use this time for ground invasion? What is it exactly? What is his real intention?
Well, thanks, Neelu, for having me on your show and for that very kind introduction. Also, sorry, a shameless self plug right at the beginning. I'm also on YouTube now on Smita Sharma Journalist. That's my handle to track. Coming to your question, Donald Trump is a man who's very clearly turned the world upside down. And he's a man whose own right hand actually doesn't know what the left hand is going to think about, it's going to strategize about. I mean, he can blame everything onto fake news and fake media as much as he wants and pleases to. But the fact remains that Donald Trump is a man who's also full of contradictions. Which is why whenever he puts out something, whether it is in all caps or not, there's a very slight chance that it will not be in all caps or in bad grammar, with the spellings absolutely horrific from the witch to the witch. You cannot take it in earnest seriousness. There are a lot of problems, the way he's thinking, and there is a method to his madness, that being driven by economic and commercial interests. So I think the world is seeing through these patterns now, which is also being investigated and reported by news media outlets of how his statements that are made, say, for instance, on Monday mornings before the American stock markets open, are meant to essentially try and stabilize the stock trading, stabilize the energy prices. He's manipulating them. He's manipulating them through his statements, whether it is one of possible negotiations or whether it is one of upping the ante. And which is why the feeling right now is amongst people who are who are looking at the region very, very closely, is that Friday, once again, we will get to hear some big news later on, which is later on tonight, once the American market, in fact, closes. And you cannot trust on Trump, which is the biggest problem, this trust deficit. At the end of the day, the Strait of Hormuz, which Donald Trump is now going on and on about and talking that how, Iran is really trying to control the waters and the freedom of navigation aspect of it. I mean, Strait of Hormuz was working perfectly fine till a month ago, before the Israelis went and hit the Iranians on 28th of February. It is the very Israeli and American forces led by Netanyahu and Donald Trump who have showed to Iran that there was this very, very strategic point which could be turned into a choke point or into a strategic leverage, that Iran must be thinking that, we should have done this a lot before than actually have waited for all this destruction to be bequeathed upon us by the
Yeah.
president of the world's largest country, in the sense that, it's a superpower country, not by any other means, but the
These
oldest democracy.
Right. No, but these reports from the Iranian news agency and Fars news agency, they've been reporting the fact that Iran is thinking of passing a legislation. Now, what happens if it formalizes a legislation? What I was also reading on Telegraph and other newspapers is that Iran has also contacted the United Nations Maritime Authority. So, which means that they are actually thinking of formalizing this toll booth system on the Strait of Hormuz. So, do you think that Iran is going to face some kind of an opposition on this? Because ultimately, everything boils down to the maritime sovereignty as well.
I mean, of course, there are countries that will be going hammer and tongs about it. This is a route that takes care of at least 20% of the world's energy supplies. It connects that route, and even the alternate routes are very difficult. Even, for instance, tomorrow the war were to stop, you would still need all that Iranian help to demine this region that has led to this kind of a choke point. We just have to also realize that this is not something that can happen very soon, keeping in mind that the bombarding on Iran actually continues. Donald Trump may
Yes.
say that I'm not going to hit the thermal plants, but Netanyahu, at the same time, as you mentioned, is making these tall announcements of how we have finished off and eliminated their Navy chief, who was the man in charge of choking that Strait of Hormuz. So for the Iranians, there is also this physical big problem of convening a majlis or a parliamentary session, given that the cities are getting bombarded physically, the assassinations are happening. There's a lot of speculation as to where is Mujtaba Khamenei, whether he is, physically injured or seriously wounded. So while for people have been streaming into the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, and the other cities where you can see those black flames, smokes, plumes of smoke coming out every time their oil tankers are hit or their infrastructure is hit. But to physically convene a parliament to be able to bring in this kind of legislation is something that is not going to happen very soon. But the Iranians do understand. I mean, if you look at the entire social media narrative battle that is going on, the Iranians, I must say, have been impressive. I've always been a fan of Iranian movies, but the way they have shaped up their social media narrative and they're putting out their animations to their video messaging, they do realize that the Strait of Hormuz will remain a very crucial leverage point now to create this pressure onto the Gulf allies of the United States, who will have to then go and tell Donald Trump that, listen, we need to de-escalate. I mean, if the Strait of Hormuz wasn't choked, at the end of the day, Iranians yesterday, they said that, we have allowed the ships of our friendly countries, in which they also included India and Pakistan. But it's not like it's a carte blanche. We still have 20 ships that are to the west of Hormuz, which was 24 till a few days ago. 4 tankers have cleared it because the Iranians are slowly clearing it. It's a point-by-point basis negotiation that is happening. So I think for the Iranians, really, they need to, right now, it's a question of their sovereignty, their existential threat, and they will use whatever weapon is available at their hand. And it's a common principle of war that the aggressor who starts the war, you cannot tell the one that you have actually, gone ahead and bombarded that, no, you need to be very measured in your response and in your reaction.
Right. But I was also reading, Smita, that Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, they're already in Islamabad. JD Vance, it was also planning to go to Islamabad and have some kind of a negotiation or talks. What is happening on that front? What are you hearing from your sources? Is this negotiation in Islamabad happening or not happening? That's not very clear. And Tehran is consistently denying that, no, we don't believe in any talks. What is actually happening behind the curtains?
I think it was either your show or somebody else's where this news had come in, and I had initially reacted saying that, look, please take it with a bucket load of salt.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of ifs and whys to this entire theory. First of all, Pakistan, at best, even if it is serving any role, which publicly, remember, their own ministers are now saying that we are only a part of a regional diplomacy. There are no talks on. Yesterday, somebody said that there is no, I think the foreign ministry spokesperson was asked about it. And he said that at least we do not have any information of passing on any so-called 15-point peace plan, either physically or digitally. I was wondering if they've sent it, through some pigeon and said kabutar ja ja ja. But jokes aside, the point is that, look, Iranians have a huge trust deficit with the Americans at this point in time, and which is absolutely justifiable. If I were an Iranian at this point in time, if I were Mojtaba Khamenei, for instance, and this one airstrike on 20th February had killed my father, not just a personal relationship, but a man who was also the political, spiritual head of state of a country which boasts of an entire civilizational heritage. The airstrike killed my mother. The airstrike killed my wife. The airstrike reportedly also killed a child of mine. How would I want to go back to a negotiation table so soon? And how could I believe that something else wouldn't happen to my negotiators when you have also targeted and taken out top leaders? Whether it is, of course, an Ali Larijani, whether it is a Ghulam Reza Soleimani, the chief of the Basij paramilitary forces. So there is that huge trust deficit gap. B is, where do you do the talks if you want to do these talks? I mean, at best, Pakistan is doing the role of a postal divide bridge right now. It really wouldn't be shaping the political outcomes of the talks per se, but facilitating the talks, if any. A role which it had played in the 70s when it had bridged that divide between Americans and China, in the Nixon administration and Mao Zedong in China. So it had done that back and forth, background channel, sort of a interlocutor, more of a role of an interlocutor, passing on the messages, conveying the messages as well between both sides. On the one hand, while it may seem that Pakistan, Iran share good relations, and Mujtaba Khamenei, in his message that was put out and read by the Iranian state television on Nowruz, he had quoted his father Ali Khamenei to say that one of the most mere पिताजी के सबसे पसंदीदा मुल्कों में से one of the most favorite countries that my father liked was Pakistan, and he had appealed to Pakistan and Afghanistan to come, to call for a ceasefire because they were warring, they're still warring, and that Iran would help in any ways. But Iran and Pakistan relationship is not without issues and confrontation. And it is also complicated with the fact that the Iranians do have a security defense pact with Saudi Arab today, which is a Sunni Arab nation, which has been a traditional rival of Iran, despite some efforts at reconciliation over the past few decades. So it's not an easy situation. I mean, the Iranians, if they even have to go for a talk today, they'll also have to find a venue which they perceive as safe from either the Israeli influence or the Sunni Arab nations. And the final point here, if they were to return to the negotiation table right now, Nilu, my simple question is, what exactly is it that they can go beyond what they hadn't already agreed to, according to reports and as per the Omani foreign minister too, in February, in those talks in Geneva, when they got bombed by Israel? I mean, what really are the talks going to bring differently into the table? In fact, if anything, the Iranians will come up as more hardliners with more, increased terms and conditions for any possible engagement.
Absolutely. But in all this, wartime talks and Hormuz Strait, what is really happening in Iran? Now, one of the most top trending subjects right now is IDF chief warns of military collapse without manpower fixes. This is what is trending right now on the social media. I mean, is Israel really facing a manpower shortage? I'm just going to read out a little portion so that you get an idea exactly what is trending here. During a meeting this week, IDF Chief Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir warned ministers of a deepening manpower crisis, with the army short about 20,000 soldiers, including 12,000 combat troops. Uh, the reservists face exhaustion from repeated rotations in Lebanon, West Bank, and against threats from Iran and Syria, worsened by the lack of Haredi draft law exempting 80,000 to about a lakh eligible men despite the 2024 court ruling. He called for immediate laws on conscription, reserve duty, and extending mandatory service to 36 months as the government blames legal delays while opposition demands action against exemptions and settler violence. So, are we to assume that Israel is really going through a manpower crisis, a military manpower crisis, which they are crying for?
It's very difficult for me to independently verify this news, of course, and I cannot confirm it because one needs to understand that the Israeli state is extremely, extremely censoring. I mean, they deeply control information, and which is why their narrative has been challenged through social media, through a lot of videos that says that the so-called whether it's their missile interceptor air domes that they've boasted about, they boasted about it so much even during the 12-day conflict last year in June, that seems to completely have been broken by the Iranians, that there are actually severe damages. The fact that the Iranians could even reach the areas where the supposed Iranian nuclear sites are, those were very, very problematic. And it's also a truth that, of course, the Israelis have opened multiple fronts. The Israeli state is in a constant state of war for survival, for political survival, if I may say so, for Netanyahu. And Lebanon is hardly being talked about. And the ground offensive in Lebanon, where thousands of people, tens of thousands of people getting displaced, the death toll getting higher, which also, again, by the way, includes high number of children and women as we learn about the situation there. It's not completely impossible that they may be facing a strain at this point in time. We already know that the interceptor missiles in the Gulf, the US military bases in the Gulf, they have been facing problems. It is not completely impossible that they also have a manpower crunch, and there are a series of memes out there on social media. But we also do need to be a little careful because clearly the propaganda war is not just being fought by any one party here. It's not just Israel, it's not just America, it's all parties. And even the Russians and Chinese are into the game, depending on which side of the teams, which teams they are playing for or backing from behind. But I do know for sure that this time around, the Americans have learned that they bit a lot more than they could chew. And it was a miscalculation because I think they were clear about their military tactics, something that CENTCOM has been constantly talking about in terms of the military objectives, but they had no clear strategy, either a strategy of going in or a strategy of exiting. And strategy is very different from tactics. You may be able to hit the navy, you may be able to hit the Iranian air force, but what really happens if you do not have a Delcy Rodriguez kind of a character that you replaced a Maduro with in Venezuela? At the
Yeah.
end of the day, you have a Khamenei who has been replaced with a much more hardline son of his now, which is a Mushtaba Khamenei. So you don't have a strategy, and that's what is leading to this entire confusion. And in the middle of that is a man who just believes that he has to make a profit out of every situation, even if it's a war that is unleashing death and destruction on other parts of the world.
No, but do you believe that there is a strong resentment within the Trump administration now, starting from Joe Kent to Tulsi Gabbard, and then we also had an ex-CIA chief, Leon Panetta, also speaking that this is Trump's fault. Do you feel that there is a great sense of resentment now within the Trump administration, though everybody is not saying it on record?
There is. I mean, he may try and dismiss off a voice like Joe Kent saying that, oh, I don't know much about him and all. But it's quite telling. And it's quite telling that even the neoconservatives in the MAGA wars, the ones who were solidly for the Iraq war as an external interference tool, not all of them are comfortable. And if you look at the MAGA versus own team, whether it is, Megyn Kelly, whether it is Tucker Carlson, they have been thoroughly critical of the government's strategy, the administration's purpose of having gone into Iran. The Democrats, of course, are strongly opposed, whether it's an Elizabeth Warren, whether it's a Chuck Schumer. We are looking at their statements coming in during the briefings being held, the Intelligence Senate briefings, or, of course, the House of Representative meetings. And the one constant that seems to come out is that there doesn't seem to be a justification that there was actually an imminent threat from Iran to the United States. So why did you go in for war, having promised that you would not start a new war, and which is the reason why the MAGA wars was actually aligned with you and were such supporters of you? I mean, George Bush, when he started for the war, he actually had a high rating. He had almost an 80% support for the Iraq war, which proved to be a disaster. Trump went into the war with just a 40% approval rating, and something that is just plummeting low every passing day.
But my last two questions, I know you're in a hurry, Smita, but are we seeing an end to this crisis? Nobody knows how long it's going to prolong. And it's quite evident that Donald Trump is trying to play around with the markets. But there were reports that he could also prepare for ground invasion. He's deployed a lot of marine troops. So what is really happening? Will he use this period, to which he has postponed it to now to 6th of April? Will he use this time for more deployment of troops? And can he go in for a ground invasion?
Well, that's the biggest fear that even Tehran has at this point in time, which is why Tehran is so openly averse to the idea of any negotiations. And they're completely calling all this news as baseless. Even, the Iranian speaker who was essentially popped up by the American media as this is the man that Trump is speaking to behind the scenes, he himself called this absolutely baseless and fake news. And all kinds of ridiculous claims are being made by Donald Trump every time that he wakes up. But having said that, look, I mean, it is a war that's not going to end anytime soon. That's my belief. That's my personal reading of the situation. You have seen the Iranians accuse that they believe that there are thousands of Americans who are actually operating as from civilian infrastructure, who are being identified, and the Iranians are going to hit them next, no matter where in the region they are. It's going to be a war that is going to be simmering, but it's not to say that regional diplomacy is not ongoing. So I do see the two areas where diplomacy can make a difference. One, how the Gulf nations finally align. I mean, the Saudi, if you look at the state, Donald Trump has been trying to make this argument that Saudi is firmly standing with America and in fact asking America that go finish up this job. And the Saudis are also asking Pakistan to come and fight this war because there is a security pact, something that makes Pakistan uncomfortable, which is why they would rather prefer a dialogue and diplomatic, in fact, an outcome instead of having to come and fight against Iran, knowing that there is a substantive Shia population even within Pakistan. And that could lead to a lot of problems at a time when they're already at war with Afghanistan. They have huge financial problems and they have political problems, particularly when it comes to the jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan. But it will be interesting to see where Qatar stands. And today, as we speak, in fact, we do understand that Pete Hegseth is in Qatar. He has just met with the Prime Minister of Qatar, who also holds, in fact, the foreign affairs portfolio as well. So the Secretary of War. Because if you see Qatar's foreign ministry's comment just 2 days ago, where they said that the annihilation of Iran is not possible and they have to find ways to coexist. So I think you are looking at the reshaping of the GCC, the Gulf country nations, where
Yes.
you may be looking at a Jordan supporting them, a Qatar not supporting them. Qatar in the past was considered, because Doha has been the office for Taliban in the past, for various factions in the past. It was looked upon as a sort of a neutral facilitator, a neutral mediator. That neutrality has come into question in the past few days. But what
Absolutely.
Qatar, Egypt, Turkey are able to do, along with Pakistan, is one area where one needs to pin one's hopes on. And the other, of course, because the Chinese have also been saying that, they would rather see an outcome because it is causing an entire disruption of global supply chains. The upcoming BRICS summit, where India, I think, which is why India is being forced to do course correction since we last spoke, having been seen as somebody who was standing firmly with the Israelis when the war broke out, Prime Minister's visit to Israel just before the war. But in the last 2-3 days, if you look at the comment that has been made by Prime Minister in Parliament, not criticizing the option, trying to do this course correction, talking to Pezeshkian, talking to Arakchi, making sure that the ships come back, there is an attempt at course correction because India does realize that in BRICS, it is right now standing isolated. Russians, Chinese, Brazil, they're all with Iran. And that's another forum which may try and, help generate some sort of a diplomatic initiative. But I think the biggest problem at the end of the day here, Nilu, remains that huge trust deficit and the trust crises. That why should
Absolutely.
Iran trust Americans? How can it go in for talks? In what venue? And with what different outcomes likely?
Right. And just before I wind up, very briefly, Smita, so India will continue to do its risk management diplomacy. I was reading one of the tweets by Brahmachalani, and he said that it's not about India is not taking a stand. India is just trying to do some risk management diplomacy. So will it continue to posture itself the way it has been doing in the past?
I don't think there's much that honestly, I mean, it can do better right now. The best thing it can do is at least try and go back to that position of strategic autonomy, which we
Yes.
have always maintained, particularly in West Asia, where all these countries have been at war and hostility with each other. It's a very complex mix when you look at West Asia. UAE has a problem with Saudi has a problem with Iran, somebody else has a problem with Qatar. These countries are not a homogeneous whole. They're not a united European sort of an alliance. They all have a lot of religious, demographic, political, really ideological issues. So for India, which is why we were so strong in our criticism of the current government and its position on Iran, not condoling the death of Khamenei, not condoling the death of the children in Minab, or those unarmed sailors who were sailing in peacetime international waters, who had come to Vishakhapatnam for an exercise on Iris Dena, the invitation of India. So there has to be a course correction. And the least that India can do right now, amid a huge energy crisis, which the government may continue to say that it is only a panic mode. I mean, every day our social media feed is completely stormed with visuals of people, of migrant labor standing there, commercial eateries, vendors, restaurants shutting down because of LPG cylinder problems and crises. The gas pipeline only comes to most homes in Delhi and the big cities. They're not there in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So it's a real problem. And I think the best that the government can do right now is to make sure that Iran remains on its good side instead of trying to make an enemy of a country that you will continue to need in the days to come.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, Smita, for joining on HW News. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
My pleasure.